There you have it. The New Orleans Saints just fired head coach Dennis Allen after dropping 7 L's in a row. Could the Saints go in a different direction and bring Jon Gruden as the head coach? We're going to break this down and what the future holds for the New Orleans Saints. So Monday morning, Dennis Allen was officially fired by the New Orleans Saints. And by all accounts, this did not happen last night after they lost to the Carolina Panthers in embarrassing fashion, where they did outplay the Carolina Panthers, but nonetheless could not get in the end zone and could not stop the Carolina Panthers on the defensive side of the football. And I think that's the real big reason why Dennis Allen has been let go. The defensive side of the football, despite the fact that for the majority of the season, they have not had significant injuries, they have been falling apart and giving up a ton of yards throughout the whole entire season. But in this past game, to be charitable to the defense and Dennis Allen, they were without Marshawn Lattimore, without Paulson Adebo, without Kool-Aid McKinstry, their starting corners, missing 3 starting corners. That's never good. We know the offensive side of the football has been completely banged up for the New Orleans Saints. No Derek Carr for 3 weeks, no Chris Olave at times due to a concussion, and also no Rashid Shaheed. He has been on injured reserve. Dennis Allen was asked to comment by Jay Glazer of Fox Sports, and he's saying, of course, I'm disappointed, but I love that organization. I love the people in there, and I always have so much love for the city of New Orleans. I always will. And that's what you saw from Dennis Allen. That was the theme that I saw, the fact that he's been pretty positive on his way out. He's really leaving on good terms with the New Orleans Saints. We know that this guy, even though he hasn't been successful as a head coach, I personally think he never got a fair shot with the Raiders, considering the fact that the Raiders had no first round picks for like 2 years while he was there, and they really had no talent on their roster. They're going through a rough transition phase. And even with the New Orleans Saints, I feel like the Saints roster has been on the decline. These are the old guys, some holdover players from the Sean Payton era, and the Saints are trying to squeeze some more production out of them. But I think it's too late for a lot of these guys, a lot of these players on the Saints. You see Cam Jordan last night, very frustrated with what happened with the Saints. But Cam Jordan really over these past 2 seasons, this season and last season has not been that productive. He's only had 2 sacks so far between this year and last year. But Dennis Allen still leaving on good terms. Maybe he can reunite with Sean Payton with the Denver Broncos as a defensive coordinator. I don't think this guy is done yet in the NFL at all whatsoever. But it didn't work out for whatever reason. He seems like he did lose some people in the locker room. Maybe the players are looking for somebody to blame other than themselves. Or maybe Dennis Allen just never had the talent as a head coach to really lead and inspire a team, but is nonetheless a good defensive coordinator. Mickey Loomis, the general manager who has a lot of power with the Saints, said that Dennis Allen's an excellent football coach and that they've had an avalanche of injuries. So he's actually giving Dennis Allen sort of an excuse here, and it took its toll. Dennis never offered excuses. He fought each day for the organization and this team, and that's what makes today disappointing. Dennis has been an integral part of this organization's success for the better part of 20 years. He will be missed, and the guy was successful as a defensive coordinator. I feel bad for him because there's so many injuries, and I feel like a lot of this was out of his control. If I could say anything that I think maybe a big coaching mistake that he made, I would say that when Derek Carr was out for 3 weeks, when Derek Carr had the oblique injury, Dennis Allen decided to start Spencer Rattler, the 5th round pick rookie at quarterback. And I think that was a huge mistake because you saw Spencer Rattler eventually get benched in the LA Chargers game, the game before this Carolina Panthers game. And as soon as Jake Haener went in, they scored. Against the Denver Broncos, Spencer Rattler was benched for Jake Haener. As soon as Jake Haener went in, they scored. So I think the whole time when the Saints went 0-3 with the rookie quarterback Spencer Rattler, I think they should have gone with Jake Haener at QB2. But for some reason, they did this weird thing where Jake Haener was QB2 and they instead decided to start QB3 Spencer Rattler. Was that something that's out of Dennis Allen's control? Was that something that the higher-ups wanted them to do? I don't know. Maybe he let fan pressure get to him. But that is the big problem that I think the New Orleans Saints are doing right now, is they're letting the mob and the fans really get to them and influence their decisions. And maybe that's why they decided to fire Dennis Allen. It could be that Gail Benson, the owner of the Saints, decided to step in. Mickey Loomis, like I said, is offering excuses while Gail Benson is saying nice, cordial things, but it seems like she decided to fire Dennis Allen. This season has been bad, especially given the fact that the Saints have dropped 7 in a row. After starting 2-0, having a close matchup against the Eagles, and everybody was thinking after 3 weeks, this is a team that can go all the way deep in the playoffs, but now they've completely collapsed. But under Dennis Allen, with Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton at QB, your first year after Sean Payton's done, you go 7-10 and then 9-8 last year. When you're dealing with the Michael Thomas drama in 2023, that guy was a toxic individual and still still the Saints were tied with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for first place in the division, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had the tiebreaker against the Saints, and so the Saints lost the division, but they could have made the playoffs last year, started out good this year, and obviously it was not good enough after they dropped 7 in a row. But I just wonder if injuries were not such a big issue, and this team has significant injuries compared to a lot of teams in the NFL, especially on the offensive side of the football. Both your starting wide receivers have been out. Your starting center and team captain has been out since week 2 of the regular season. Your quarterback was out for a month. And then now you have injuries at the linebacker position, at the cornerback position. And this is already a roster that I hate to say it, is not that talented. This roster is not that talented. They have some guys who are very interesting, some guys who can maybe develop to be really great players, but this is a older roster that is past their prime. And we'll talk about who the next head coach could be. I hope they make the right decision, because if they do not, I think they need to free my dog Derek Carr and get him out of New Orleans, because this organization just seems incredibly dysfunctional right now, listening to the mob. And they are $60 million over the cap next year. We know the Saints manipulate the cap every single year to get under, but because they have so many players who are older and past their prime, they're in this rough position where they have to keep some players who are not that productive. Like we mentioned earlier, Cam Jordan seems like a great guy, but is not playing at a prime level. And you have to wonder, if the Saints were not in this position with the cap space, would they move on from a lot of these veteran pieces? And they also are tied to Derek Carr. Derek Carr would be about a $50 million cap hit next year. They have to actually hope that he helps them out in a restructure in order for them to even get under the cap next year. So Carr seems like he's locked in and kind of stuck on the New Orleans Saints. So hopefully they make the right coaching decision next year for him and his career. One of the big issues I have with the Saints is their fan base. I think not only do they have a toxic fan base, but they have players who kind of feed off the negativity of the fans. And I think that's how Dennis Allen lost the locker room really quickly, despite the fact that when you look at it on paper, he's not the worst head coach in the NFL. I mean, he's really just not. But you got fans reacting negatively to this statement by Jeff Duncan, a reporter of the Saints, saying that Dennis Allen played a key role in this franchise for 20 years and he should be considered part of the Saints Hall of Fame. Man, he was there on the defensive side of the football when Sean Payton had some success. So I don't know why so many fans in the replies are just saying Hall of Fame, and just mocking this guy. This guy really, like Mickey Loomis said, never made excuses, even though I think he has had a ton of excuses. Do I think he's a talented head coach? Do I think that he, should have kept this position for years and years and years? No, because essentially it wasn't good enough. And I think he doesn't have that cherry on top to give inspiration to his players and coaching staff to make them play at a higher level. But the guy is not the worst in the NFL. And there are so many problems that the Saints have been dealing with so far. But you got players like Carl Granderson. We talked about Michael Thomas, former players who are unemployed on the couch talking shit on the Saints, Dennis Allen and Derek Carr. By the way, we did our video on the Michael Thomas, Derek Carr drama. The link is in the description below. All of that information is still relevant as we broke down the Carolina Panthers loss last night and predicted that this would happen, a Dennis Allen firing. But you got Carl Granderson on Instagram when, they had that loss against the Carolina Panthers. He had a heartbreak emoji. And then today, when Dennis Allen's fired, changes a little emoji here, good day. So this is a defensive player, an edge defender for the Saints. Happy that Dennis Allen is fired. And the reason why I say we need to get Derek Carr, if they are not going to make the right decision, the Saints, for this organization in terms of the head coach, we'll talk about the Gruden possibility in a little bit. If they don't make the right decision for Derek Carr, free my dog DC, get him the F out of New Orleans, because I just don't like whenever an organization starts to listen to the fans and players as to what they should do in the front office. That is how you know that an organization is getting desperate, when you start listening to people who are not qualified to make these decisions. Yes, players play the game, but players are not general managers. Players are not head coaches. Some of them can do that, but very rarely does it happen. And when you start listening to the mob and the noise to make some of these decisions, that shows that you're desperate and don't know what to do with your steering wheel, so you let somebody else take over and hold the wheel. That's not the smart way to go, in my opinion. The reason why we know this roster is extremely overrated in New Orleans. New Orleans Saints fans think that they have tons of all pros, but it's extremely overrated and not great. And the reason why we know that is because several NFL insiders are talking about how this is not an attractive destination for any head coach. That is a fact. It's going to be very hard for the Saints to convince somebody to be the head head coach of this football team because they are in cap hell and they got an aging roster that is not performing at a high level. And you got Ari Murov saying that the Saints may never want to admit it, but executives around the league have believed for years that they need a roster reset, which they've consistently resisted. Tuesday's trade deadline should be interesting. You got rumors about Marshawn Lattimore being on the trade block. Last time I looked at it, I don't think they saved that much, but at least you get some draft capital for Lattimore. But other than him, I don't know any other player that any team would just be dying to trade for. I mean, there are some guys who are talented here and there, but they're literally on their very last leg. So I don't see any more trades happening for the New Orleans Saints. And that's the big issue that's happening with this team is whoever they pick up as head coach is going to have to find a way to make it work with this roster. And they're going to have to find somebody who's willing to do that. I don't think one of the hot candidates, offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, Ben Johnson, is going to want to do that. Speaking of offensive coordinator, now that Dennis Allen is fired, I'm curious, what happens to Clint Kubiak? Everybody was all about Clint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator in the first two games when they were doing well. But ever since they have not been able to effortlessly run the football, although they did a great job last night because Alvin Kamara is one of the older players who's still playing at a high level. You got to give respect to Alvin Kamara. They recently re-signed him. But what's going to happen with Clint Kubiak? The offense has been going downhill. He's part of Dennis Allen's staff. Dennis Allen made the decision to hire him. Will they completely reset in this offseason and get rid of the hotshot offensive coordinator Kubiak? I think another team would try to pick him up based on the fact that he had some success within the first 4 weeks of the regular season. Either way, the Saints named the special teams coordinator Darren Rizzi as their interim head coach. This guy has been part of the team for quite some time. He's respected in the locker room, and they typically do this. I feel like teams typically have a special teams person as the interim head coach because they know everybody on the roster working on special teams. I don't foresee this guy becoming the long-term answer for the Saints. And as of right now, I'm curious, do the Saints even know what they're going to do? They claim they're doing the head coaching search right now, and I just have a feeling. I don't know why. We talked about the fact that this is not an attractive destination. You're going to need somebody who wants to take on this challenge, somebody who is probably a little more desperate than the average individual for a head coaching job. And Jon Gruden, the guy who's been blacklisted from the NFL because he made fun of Roger Goodell in leaked emails and then sued the NFL, he is available right now. We see him on his show, Gruden Loves Football. He actually interviewed Derek Carr early on in the season after they had that great game against the Dallas Cowboys, I believe. So Jon Gruden's still in the air. People know about him. He has his TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube channel, which is absolutely awesome. Gruden Loves Football. And remember, Jon Gruden, Derek Carr, they almost worked together in New Orleans. Gruden actually went to the New Orleans Saints facilities and helped them at practice, and he helped the Saints generally transition with Derek Carr. And what was actually a little more crazy, what people don't really talk about, is not only did Gruden help out with the Saints in 2023 in the summer, but during the season, towards the end, when they had that big win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons towards literally this past January. Think about that. This past January, you had Jon Gruden and the New Orleans Saints having dinner before they played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let me try to fit this whole thing in here. January 10th, 2024, we were already talking about the Saints. Will they fire Dennis Allen? Is this going to be a possibility? And people were already speculating that Jon Gruden could be in the plans. And Jon Gruden was a consultant with the Saints, obviously, and was on the radar for a full-time role. He could have maybe been the offensive coordinator, but he has his lawsuit in the background, and him being an offensive coordinator would complicate the lawsuit. If you've been following the lawsuit like me, it's unfortunately been wrapping up and not going in a positive direction for Jon Gruden. Right now, the Nevada Supreme Court is reconsidering the case, whether or not it will go to arbitration or open trial. Last time they voted that it will go to arbitration. Maybe they'll vote that same way again. Who knows? It wasn't looking good because Gruden lost 2-1 in the vote with the Nevada Supreme Court. Now they're going to have 7 people vote. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. But the lawsuit is expected to wrap up likely by the end of this year, unless, of course, it goes to trial. Then that makes things a little bit more complicated, and I think you can't consider Jon Gruden. But if it does not go to trial, if it goes to arbitration, unfortunately, that would be bad for Jon Gruden. But if that happens, that does open the door for him to be able to at least try to join the NFL again. And remember, before that Week 17 game in Tampa, Gruden met with Saints officials. He met with Mickey Loomis. Gruden had dinner with the Saints brass, including general manager Mickey Loomis, and then he attended minicamp and all that. But I always thought that was odd that he met with the general manager Mickey Loomis. I understand him meeting with head coach Dennis Allen, some of the offensive coaching staff, but the fact that he met with Mickey Loomis, I've always wondered, is there something going on in the back? background. Why would you need to meet with the general manager when he's not exactly a part of the game planning like the coaching staff? This shows me that it was not the coaching staff, Dennis Allen, that hired Jon Gruden as a consultant and wanted to meet with him, but the Saints organization itself, including Mickey Loomis. So I don't think this is out of the realm of possibility. There was also some reports that the Saints did not receive much pushback from the NFL for having Jon Gruden be a consultant. And really, you are allowed to actively have a lawsuit against the NFL and still work in the NFL. Obviously, it could hurt your lawsuit because Gruden is saying that he's selectively targeted. But if the Saints go out there and try to hire Jon Gruden and the NFL tries to prevent it, that will only prove Jon Gruden's case that he is being unfairly targeted and discriminated against, and that there is an orchestrated campaign to end his career. So if they really wanted this to happen, I think it is a possibility. Who else will be able to steer this ship? We talked about the horrible financial situation that the Saints are in terms of their cap space. They have to have Derek Carr on the team next year and actually have to have Derek Carr really rework his contract. They have to hope that he helps the New Orleans Saints. So they're stuck in this rough position, and I don't really see any other head coach who would want to take this opportunity because Jon Gruden has the stigma from the lawsuit, from the emails. He might be the guy who would take on this opportunity, and he literally just talked to the Saints general manager, 10 months ago in January. So Dennis Allen, I don't think it was all on him. I feel bad for the guy that he was put in this rough position this year, but this opens the door for a new chapter of the New Orleans Saints, and they don't look like a team that could exactly press the reset button next year. Maybe the year after in 2026, they could financially be able to do that. But right now, they still have to try to work this team out, rework some deals, and go on somewhat of another playoff run with an old roster. Maybe Jon Gruden could be the guy to take that opportunity. My name is Wi-Fi Willie. Subscribe. Peace out. Hope you have a good one.